Welcome, dear students. The topic of our current session is what is left unsettled in language. The purpose or the objective of the session is that by the end of the session, you would understand what were the areas that were yet left uncovered, that were yet left unsettled in the language during the Renaissance time period and the modern English period, especially the early modern English period. Well, my dear students, though a lot of progress had already been made during the Renaissance time, a good many features of the language were, settled. However, we cannot say everything was settled. There were still quite a few things that were left unsettled. Why it was so? Because language and its development is a continuous process. It is not so that one day in the morning you would wake up and you'd say, oh, language problems are fixed now. It takes time, and gradually and slowly over the time, changes take place. So in the process of standardization of language, especially the standardization of the written language of English language, during these times, a lot of issues were resolved with reference to grammar, with reference to vocabulary, with reference to pronunciation, and especially with reference to spelling. However, still, because, once something is done in language, it is not so that you decide a rule and then, you tell everybody that this is going to be the rule. No, it is through the usage. Gradually, it becomes a part of the usage and only then it is accepted. So, no change happens in one day. So, still some old practices were going on, A. B, what was needed was there were certain areas that still needed attention. Overall, however, when we look at the language of the times, a lot of latitude was enjoyed. The speakers of English language, particularly, because they belonged now to the educated class, the upper class, they were in a strong position. We can clearly notice the kind of latitude that they permitted, that they allowed, the flexibility that they allowed in language. In fact, it was kind of two processes going parallel. One, the process of standardization of language that would impose restrictions, that would bring forth rules, that would standardize it. The other process that was going parallel to that was, becoming more and more popular, kind of dealing with and taking care of the everyday needs of the people, becoming a language that was spoken everywhere. Now, in all this process, these are seemingly two opposite processes, but they were going on together. What was the result? The result was literary language and good colloquial English. They were very, very close. The kind of language we find in the literature of the times, good colloquial language was almost, I would say, of the same standard. So, for instance, where one might say have wrote or have written with equal propriety. So, standardization was happening, but flexibility was still there. It was allowed, it was permitted, it was in the usage. People would use both the options, have wrote and have written. Which option do you use? Of course, this one, have written. Of course, we do not use this one now. Now, this is not acceptable. But at that time, both were acceptable. In the same way, look at this example. Hausen or houses. So, here we talked about, tenses, grammar. Here we are talking about making plurals. The plural of house as houses as we use it today, and hausen, that was a comparatively, older, choice. Both were being used. And actually Shakespeare used both of these. In the same way, Shakespeare also used shoon and shoes. The plural of shoe, as we use it today, is shoes. This shown is not acceptable now. But it was acceptable during Shakespeare's times. It was going parallel in usage, so Shakespeare used both the options. So, one in the Renaissance time would come across a variety of not only of spellings, but also of pronunciation. Look at these two choices. The pronunciation could vary. It could be service or it could be service. Here are further examples you would see of, this kind. The spellings would differ. Certain could be pronounced as sartan as well. Concern as concern as well. Divert is divert as well. Clerk is clerk as well. And smart and smart were both the choices that were also acceptable. These and many other matters were still unsettled in language. Language still needed time. English language had developed a lot. It was standardized to a great extent, especially in writing. But there were still many things that needed attention. They needed time to be settled. Their settlement actually was one of the major concerns of the next age. Overall, I would say that eagerness of the times, willingness, and desire to improve language, as well as the enthusiasm that people had towards the standardization of language, these aspects of the society of the times resolved most of the issues of the language, and only a few issues were left, or a few ambiguities were left that were later on settled in the upcoming times.